applied, they realized they didn't have the money to mitigate the downstream residents. So then what they did is last year, right before the fence went up, is they said that they shopped around with engineers and went through 3 before they could get an engineer to say, well, in a major seismic event, if there were people on the platform, it could be dangerous. And so to try to circumvent the FEMA process of mitigating downstream, they said we need to take it down as an emergency, it's dangerous. And so we, the town, hired our own engineer, and you should know that for the last 3 years we've had an earthquake monitor on it, and it hasn't had any negative impact. Whenever we had an earthquake, there's been no damage at all to the platform. So it's withstood it just fine. We hired our own engineer who said it's perfectly safe, but you could even make it stronger for less than $100,000. It was a quote. Wow. So we told the county, no, you can't tear it down in an emergency. You have to file for a permit like everyone else, and you have to follow FEMA rules and do all that. Well, the next week we got an eviction notice because the town had been renting it essentially for $1 either a month or a year, minimal amount, and so they said, here's your notice, you get off. And they put up that fence. First it was a chain link, and now it's a more attractive fence. Yeah. So, so they evicted us, and they fenced it, and they say that that they are somehow going to get the money through grants. They haven't got them yet, and they're going to complete the project. And we have attempted to say, look, we will shore it up. We don't think that they'll ever actually either get the money or finish the project. It's taken them so long to even get to this point. So the town has proposed, said we'll accept the liability, we'll buy it from you, you can give it back to us, they won't budge. So that's the status of it right now. Whether they'll get grant money and be able to finish the project is unknown. And Flood Zone 9, our town has gotten out of it, but the other towns in it expires in 2027, and the popular thinking is nobody's going to re-up because they haven't really got anything from it. It's been on your tax bill for many, many years now, but you haven't got anything to show for that. And so it may be that in 2027, if they haven't accomplished anything, we'll get it back then.
Wow.
So that's the status.
And why would the county not sell it back to the town? What was their
I think it's a little bit face saving because they've spent $52 million through Flood Zone 9 and don't have anything to show for it. And I think they will feel like if they can finish this project, it'll show they've done something. So I think that's their thinking. I don't necessarily buy it, but I think it's an attempt to push back on the argument that they've just wasted all our money.
Yeah.
Which they have.
And yet they are doing it in the face of, you would have to believe almost a great majority of San Anselmo residents would wish that we would have it back now.
I think that's,
and so it's really against, they're going against our wishes.
The majority of our residents already voted to get out of Flood Zone 9.
Right.
Yeah. The split is slightly different about whether it should come out and whether it does do something for flood mitigation or not. It would do a small amount. It would, 3 inches or so of water. So it would do something. And depending on where you live, or if you own a business right here, then you might think it should come out. So, it has not been a success.
Yeah. So what steps can the town take at this point?
For flooding or related to the plaza?
To try to change to get the platform back and get it away from the county.
So one thing we can do, I don't think Katie Rice is going to do anything, but depending on who our new supervisor is, that may have some impact on what happens. And they own it, so we can't just make them give it to us.
Right.
They do, the county, does work for us.
Yeah.
I know people don't think of it that way, but they do work for us. So our town manager has attempted to negotiate without success. So I'm not sure there's much more we can do right now other than just sort of public pressure.
Yeah.
That's sort of
maybe there are some ways public pressure can be asserted.
Yeah.
And one of them, obviously, it seems to me, would be if by some event of Ford getting a seat back and myself, you know, would show a certain strength of the population making a statement.
We've tried.
Well,
no, I agree, and if because one of the reasons why it's gone so poorly is because there's been a majority on the town council who have just kowtowed to the county and haven't pushed back, haven't fought back, haven't tried to let the county know how much we value the plaza and how much we want it. So if the balance of power on the town council were to shift so that we would have a majority instead of a minority, and couple that with some kind of maybe events and organizing of community pressure and community impetus, that might make a difference on the county, along with the fact that probably the county's not going to be able ultimately to be able to do the downstream mitigation and make their project work. So the more we can torture them and make them suffer for the bad choices that they've made, it would likely have an impetus to force them to change their mind.
Yeah, it's also true that we have a little bit of power over whether to issue a permit. Now, if they meet the requirements, you know, the FEMA requirements for a permit, our town Department of Public Works should issue it, you know, just like if you meet the requirements to do a remodel in your house, you should have that by right. But they haven't been able to meet it, and any permit issuance can be appealed to the council. So we could tie it up potentially. They would probably, even if we denied it, they would probably bring a lawsuit related to that. But you know, there's other ways sort of to kind of muck it up a little bit.
Well, I think if I remember Sean's denial,
the first permit application was denied.
The application is that he required the county to pass FEMA muster as a condition precedent to him issuing it.
Yeah, our own ordinance requires it.
Yeah,
it requires
so
them.
they've got to deal with the FEMA regs, which thus far they haven't been able to do. So.
Well.
So, but the latest is they've hired a consultant that used to work for FEMA, and they are moving forward with the process. So we'll see.
Wow.
Every timetable they've given us, they'll say, you know, oh, the mitigation will be done with the downstream neighbors in 3 months, and that was a year ago or more. You know.
Well, don't forget they'll be meeting with everybody first.
Yeah, I mean, you know, they tell us these timelines that are just ridiculous and that they never meet ever.
Well,
So,
I think Ford pointed us to thinking in terms of, you know, maybe we could try organizing an event again in the park where specifically it would be something that you could have coverage from the IJ and people would come specifically to urge the county.
The IJ is not exactly favorable.
Right, but you know, if we had a good turnout with a, you know, that was our reason for being there. And
back when the county shut it down 2 years ago, and we had this special Zoom meeting about it, there were 188 people on that Zoom meeting. There were a lot, and nobody. I mean, everybody had beautiful stuff to say about the plaza.
they made the mistake of first just putting crime tape around it, which probably was just torn down, you know. And so, but it drew attention to the fact that there was something going on, you know, and that they were going to try to close it. So that actually did raise a lot of awareness about the issue. And then a cyclone fence went up. So.
wow.
Anyway, so that's what's going on with that.
That's our big issue, really. There's lots of big issues, but that's the fundamental one right in our lap, and it could be such an incredible boost to our community to get it back. I mean, it's such a positive thing that it just seems like definitely worth fighting for.
Yeah.
Definitely worth, you know. I think there may not be that much there maybe, right? I mean, if they don't really have a clear plan of what actually is going to succeed or not.
Well, they're trying to develop one, and that's what's still remains to be seen. We don't know who the consultant is or how much has been done, if any, and what the ultimate game plan is. But irrespective of whatever the county's approach may be, the FEMA requirements that are tied to the no-rise rule and the necessity for mitigation to be mapped out, and the mitigation part is complicated and stiff because the county can't just have a plan for mitigation. They've got to have all of the property owners signed up, and so the property owners have to consent to the point that they're willing to sign on the dotted line that they're being recompensed adequately. And then the other FEMA requirement is that if those mitigation contracts, if there are any property owners who don't sign, what the county's required to do is to bring an eminent domain action against them so as to bring them into the scope of the project. And the idea that houses in San Anselmo and especially Ross are going to be the subject of eminent domain actions is ludicrous. I mean, it's just not going to happen.
Well, what they're trying to do now, though, is remap the floodplain and try to say with our better and new mapping, we aren't going to flood anybody, or it's going to be almost nothing, so we don't have to mitigate. That's the tactic that they're moving toward now.
That's right.
Is,
that's what I was going to ask, is how many homeowners are we talking about?
And was it based on anything specific that's changed that they've claimed that they've done, or this new?
They're working with consultants and experts that are using a new 3D map.
Yeah. It's modeling, so
It's
they
modeling.
have to project what the impact is going to be of the downstream people. But the last I was reading in the newspaper, which has now been a couple of years ago, seemed like, you know, it was going to be kind of a minor issue for kind of a minor number of people. But if we're really talking about more than a handful of people,
I think
that's a big deal.
The numbers have moved around significantly.
Yeah, okay.
A lot.
Yeah.
And of course, that's what it's kind of like shopping around for a fourth expert opinion after getting 3 saying that the plaza wasn't going to fall down. It's similar litigation manipulation. But the rub for the county is that the mapping that controls now, the default mapping is FEMA originated. And in order for the county to be able to sell its approach to FEMA, it's got to sell to FEMA the adequacy of its mapping. And so I think that's one of the reasons why they're trying to hide their hand as much as possible, is so that we can get in there and start looking at the factual predicates and analyzing how adequate or not they are.
And I think if people who were previously identified as needing mitigation, if now they tell them they're not,
They don't need it anymore.
they're going to get sued. The county's going to get sued.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, so it could be a protracted project.
And is some of this, are you finding some of this information now on the county's website that you guys are fairly informed?
Are you able to
Can you
move
use-
around the county? I can't find
I can't
squat
find
on that
anything
website.
on that website.
No kidding, it's
Yeah.
And
completely
I'm on a
inadequate.
board where I have meetings. I can't find our own meetings.
Well, I signed up for the Flood
It's
District
awful.
newsletter, but we're no longer,
I feel
but that
quite
shouldn't matter.
intentional.
2 years
I think
ago, and
so.
I've gotten one
No,
email
because,
since
I mean,
then.
the old one was bad enough, but ultimately, you could find the report, if you persevered enough or got help, you could find the reports. And now, I can't find anything.
Well, they have there's an alphabetical part where you can look things up, but it doesn't apply to any of the committees or commissions, so they don't tell you that. So
Yeah.
they're just, anyway, I have my problems with the
No,
county,
so
and
I
I
was
just
just
really
wondering
feel like everything's
if you
got
were
murdered.
successful in being able to glean intelligible information, I'd like to know what you're doing.
Yeah. Well, I would be concerned about anything with FEMA now, because I think they're just so overwhelmed by everybody in the whole country having flooding issues. I mean,
Wow.
the
Wow.
rain shut down the whole
Wow.
Southeast. So this is like not
Wow.
really on their.
They're not undertaking many more chances at
Yeah.
all, probably.
One of the things that's interesting about that is the reliance on I think it's $8.5 million grant that the town initially obtained from the Department of Water Resources of the state of California to transform Memorial Park into a detention basin.
Yeah.
And so they've been moving that to apply to this project, and there are deadlines on it. And so, I mean, and that dates back to 2014, 2015, that it's been delayed in its application. So that's another one of the moving parts that the county has to have its eye on and has to satisfy in order to be able to come up with the money to finance just the physical part of the project, not the mitigation. Because that doesn't, the way that I understood it when I was on the Flood Zone 9 advisory board was that the 8.5 went to construction, not mitigation costs. And the mitigation cost part was then estimated to be between $3 and $10 million bucks. And now as I understand it, the county is saying that at the most, the mitigation is going to be $3 million. So I mean, they've lied so much at every turn, and it's misrepresented. Who knows really what the actual numbers are?
Or maybe they just don't know.
Well, I don't think they do, because also they lose personnel, and so there's not there's very little. The only person who seems now left that has any institutional knowledge is Tracy Clay, and she doesn't seem that bright to me, because all the other persons that worked on it have gone. So I don't know how much actually, part of the problem that the county had to begin with was that they had an intention that was good. Stopping flooding was a good intention, but they didn't have a plan, and they never had a plan, and they never had any sequencing, and kept their approach was scattershot and ultimately heavily dependent on the idea of detention basins without ever checking with and the detention basins could only happen on public property because private property was too expensive and they could never afford it. And so they didn't think it through, and they didn't suss it out so as to be able to determine any sort of likelihood of whether or not the populace would accept detention basins. And the first one was here, and by the time all the flood waters from local planning and zoning, it then gets expressed through that and local control. And that's what the problem is with the top-down state-originated mandates, is that they completely eviscerate and disregard all of the local control prerogatives that have been protected for decades, if not the better part of a century. In order to challenge that, the only way to challenge that, since it's legislation that's coming down from the state of California, is by litigation. And so far, all of the municipalities in Northern California have been completely gutless when it comes to suing and challenging the state. It's been different in Southern California, and there's been some success in Southern California, but that's the play. Otherwise, I mean, if local towns didn't join together, didn't sue the state, didn't litigate, we just have to eat it. We're stuck.
Yeah.
We're stuck.
Well, unless you could negotiate those smaller pieces in order to show that you're trying to meet the limit in order, I'm happy to do anything to avoid a claim of builder's remedy.
I agree.
Well,
I mean,
yeah.
Right.
Please, let's
That's
do
nasty.
something before we get to that moment.
Well, see, I mean, that's what Eileen worked really hard on doing in the last year in terms of our housing element, because it's by means of not having a housing element in place, I think, that
Subject to the
that
builder's
makes
remedy.
us
Yeah.
then vulnerable to the so-called builder's remedy.
Yeah.
But our housing element has increased density, it has increased the height of buildings. So we have had to change some of that to get it approved. It's gonna take a different legislature in Sacramento or citizen initiative to change some of this. Because the lawsuits have been somewhat successful. That sort of centers around the structure of charter, whether you're a charter city or not. So,
That's what succeeded.
yeah.
so
Another
far.
interesting topic. Yeah, I've been using this on my little span in the avenue. Ford, you may have direct knowledge about this. This is a quote I've taken out of San Anselmo's appeal to Sacramento from the official San Anselmo text that ended up with Brian Colbert's signature on it. And it's just a piece, but this is the constitutional issues. So this is San Anselmo's appeal to Sacramento. The proposed RHNA, which is, Regional Housing Needs Allocation, that's violates the domain of local government's exercise of police power protected by California Constitution, Article 11, Section 7, period. ABAG's limits on the basis for appealing the allocation and failure to provide complete data, which they didn't bother to allow jurisdictions to even verify their data and calculations results in an unconstitutional abrogation of the right to seek redress of grievances protected by the First Amendment to the United States Constitution. Now, somebody in San Anselmo wrote this and sent this to Sacramento, and I think it was like, hooray!
Every
This
town
is-
in Marin did it.
They used the same quote.
Pretty
We
much.
borrowed it.
I mean, it's similar, yeah.
Well, it's important and it's powerful. Now, just let me ask a silly question. We all, when you get to office, do you swear to uphold and defend the Constitution?
That's against all enemies, foreign and domestic.
Particularly domestic.
I thought so.
But all it takes is a 3-2 vote, and anything happens.
Oh, well,
As we know.
anyway.
That's right.
3-2.
That's right.
Be careful who you elect.
When I moved to Fairfax in 1989, I remember people telling me you couldn't get water permits. And there were lots that could not be sold.
Right.
Now, something has changed since then. But so now you're telling me you've got to build more housing, and yet there's people losing their fire insurance here. It doesn't seem to really,
Oh, it's
like
all
we're bursting at the seams.
Crazy. We are bursting at the seams. I think
Sorry.
this is too
Doesn't
much.
match up, does it?
No, it doesn't quite match up to
Yeah.
me, no.
Well, and it's so crazy is the Sierra Club, which, fought for the right of open space and,
Yeah, exactly.
local control, now wants more housing.
Well, no, it's been co-opted. The leadership of the Sierra Club
Yeah.
has been co-opted by ideologically driven local special interests, so that the traditional Sierra Club values have been subverted to local special interest agendas.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, they said there was a new generation who believes they're the most passionate environmentalists of all, but yet don't seem to have care that their own world is becoming like an urban jungle, but yet they can.
Yeah.
A disconnect of
I
logic.
am a political idiot. And this seems terribly obvious to me. Newsom is from here. Doesn't that count for anything?
And he just moved back
He
to
just-
Ross.
Yeah, I'm told he's, on the weekends, he's living in his, someone gave me the
Yeah.
lowdown, his 7.5 acre estate with 5 different security guards. He's there every weekend. And I wonder, what is your community? You have all these laws to do all this stuff that California,
We should ask them how many high-rise buildings would get on your 7.5 acre lot there.
fine.
Ross is actually building housing in downtown Ross.
Yeah.
But they're building an
Or
apartment
what do you
complex.
lose if you don't do it?
Where?
How tall is
down
it?
the bushes?
If you don't obey,
If you don't,
Kind of by that
Then
little,
the-
by post office.
Yeah.
builders come in and rape your house.
Yeah.
Oh, so it's not even that they fund
by the post office,
or
you
to
know.
keep away the government funds, they make it open season for the
It's not huge,
developers.
but it's not very good.
So all of the above.
Yeah, okay, good.
Yeah, it's rude.
It kind of makes you feel like that's where it's coming from.
Yeah, that's the enemy. The state's the enemy.
So high.
And the developers.
Yeah, well, yeah. It's the developers that
Isn't there
have
any way, I mean,
been
there's
pushing
like space up to the
greener
mountains and stuff.
within the source.
There is.
Oh my goodness.
Where's my service?
Wow, it's getting better and better.
Fabulous.
Where's my service? That's okay.
Wow.
My. Yeah.
You insist.
No, I think it's the issue of our times right now, and to me, it's a environmental, ecological call for the planet to wake up on a bigger level.
Welcome.
What you were reading there, though, Guy, if I understood you correct, that was an appeal to Sacramento in some way, as opposed to something in the courts. I mean, that's
Right.
talking about constitutional
Right.
rights.
Had nothing to do with
Appealing
the
to
courts.
Sacramento is like the wolf guarding the hen house. They're
Right,
not-
exactly. In fact, it went, it was a very well-written appeal. I read the whole thing, and everybody, Eileen and Ford can testify to that. And they asked for a reduction of these numbers from 830 units, which were completely out of somebody's punitive brain, just trying to punish people, to 555, which even that to me is like stop. That's 10, 50 unit apartments what you're talking about. So yeah, it went to HCD, and HCD is somehow controlled by a group of people who wouldn't even give a reason, wouldn't compromise one iota with any of these towns. When fire danger, water, we were so close to about 3 months away that 2 years ago when the drought was upon us, that it would be a total dire emergency if that winter didn't produce a lot of water.
Well, that's a powerful,
Huh?
that's a powerful point on the, other side, the side against like just, expanding demands for more housing.
It hasn't been successful.
It has not at all,
No.
right?
Well, no, but something's got to give here, because we've got 80 supermajority of Democrats. They all seem to right now in Sacramento. Amy, who was here earlier with her husband, is like been such a fabulous active force. She's been going to Sacramento and lobbying and has some great stories. But as Ford was saying, there's sort of this division between Northern California and Southern California. The perception of Orange County Republicans as being, they're the white Republican racists, and they're thinking also that we are just kissing ass to, Sacramento, and are not reaching out still enough. But there's lots of grassroots organizations all up and down California, like Amy's organization, citizenmarin.org, and she started in Tam Valley. And, I feel like we've got to fire away and try to waken up people. Right. But it's about
So
liberty.
I'm going to join Mona as a political idiot, and say
No such thing.
why couldn't there be a lawsuit on the constitutional issue, and if that was decided, that would force Sacramento to change course? So has that been tested and happened, or no?
Hasn't it gone through at all?
Well,
No.
could it?
Wow.
Or is that a
Yes, it could. That's why I said if there's the will.
Well, what would
Because
There
it
has
would take
to
a
be the
lot of
will-
money
There has to be
to-
the will on all of the local or enough of the local jurisdictions, or at least one, where you have a town council or a city council that says, yeah, enough already, and we want to take this step. We're willing to bear the financial freight, which would be significant.
Right.
So it starts there. It starts with the local government decision-making process. That's who would make the decision to initiate the litigation. And my experience with currently most local councils are not exactly brave.
Everybody else seems to have a lot of special interests that line up with the party line because they want to not ours.
But the answer is yes, and that's how you do it.
But it seems like what you're saying, Ford, is that, I mean, could you just
Could I what?
launch one? I mean, you as an attorney, or Eileen,
You need a plaintiff.
a plaintiff.
Yeah, you need a plaintiff.
So someone.
Well, your constitutional rights are being violated individually. If I'm understanding.
I already used myself as a plaintiff once when I sued the county over the flood control election.
Well, then you have an experienced resume.
I think that would be, I think we're hitting the nail on the head in terms of what I would
That doesn't mean I'm
love,
gonna
hope to
volunteer.
see and feel like I think our backs are up against the wall. I think it's such a disaster, and particularly if in this election, our opponents right now, who seem to have no questions, acceptance of what's going on. I feel like this is like our motivation, part of our motivation. That let's me, what I would hope. Let's do this. I'd like to be that town and stand up.
It takes one town, I guess, to be the actual plaintiff.
Somebody has to start.
Yeah, but wouldn't it be the case that once something was started, other towns would contribute to funding it? So I
Either
think that should
contribute
be-
or
that should
sign
be
on.
solved.
One would hope so.
Yeah, it should be a class
But there's
action
no
lawsuit
guarantee.
or
And
something
it does
like
take
that.
money, it's not like, you want to work for free on these things after.
Well, the RENA numbers come in cycles, and at the midterm of the cycle, that means that how long you have to meet your housing element numbers. At the midterm of the cycle, if you're not on track, there are certain penalties that exist, and no one's going to be on track.
Right.
Because the town itself, doesn't build housing. We just have to make it attractive for developers to build housing. But the state can punish us, as it exists now, for not doing that, for not attracting developers, for not having the housing built. And that's actually, they never really have. It has been sort of a non-enforced, they've encouraged housing over the years, over the cycles, but they never did anything. And now they're getting more powerful.
And if you read the rhetoric too of Bonta and Newsom recently in Elk Grove, this just strongly rhetoric as if they are just going after these criminal towns and cities. I mean, maybe there's some of them might have been a little bit of that, but they're just framing it as, my God, this is Galahad, defeating, and I think it keeps everybody in the towns like, oh gosh,
We're going to see that.
I don't know. Where do I see that?
No, we are going to at the midterm of the cycle, because people aren't going to meet it.
No, as Amy says, it's unachievable.
It is
her
unachievable.
term.
Yeah, and the other thing I think that you'll start seeing more and more of is municipalities and school districts buying up property to develop on their own for workforce housing.
Right.
And we're starting to see that a little bit now. But that's one way to control of saying, if let's say the town bought that property down where the post office is and said, we're going to develop it, but in a way that fits with our town, because we don't want a tower. So I think we haven't seen a lot of that yet. We've seen a little bit of the county doing it and a little bit of school districts doing it. But I think we're going to see more of that. And that's one way to control.
That would count toward the housing element. They were like,
anything additional units, and an additional unit is a 6-bedroom house or a 1-apartment, single apartment.
The ADU conversions.
Or an ADU. They're counted equally as AU, one unit.
The code, right, the building code.
So that's another way to control and potentially even to provide workforce housing. It is true that we are having trouble, for example, we're down 8 police officers in Central Florida Police because we can't get them, we can't hire them because they can't afford houses here. So it is an issue that we have to deal with. But what development looks like and how much of it is the hard part.
School districts are not under the control of the municipalities, though.
Right.
They're not.
And they'll tell you that too.
They're not.
So, but I think ADUs has been the best part that's worked. There's other things where people can split their property or sell part of their property as a somebody else. But that stuff has not happened very much. But I'm just going to give you my experience as an architect.